Don't pull out now, the voice resonated, not just in his ears but like a low thrum deep in his chest, a vibration that felt both alien and oddly familiar. I'm so close. Cale froze, his wrench hovering over the corroded conduit. Sparks spat nearby from a fried junction box, casting erratic light across the cavernous, decaying cargo bay. The air tasted metallic and ancient. He hadn't heard anyone else aboard the Leviathan's coil in cycles, not since the last crew of doomed scavengers vanished into its depths. He slowly lowered the wrench, his other hand drifting towards the pulse pistol holstered on his thigh. "Who's there?" He called out, his voice rough, swallowed by the vast silence of the derelict. The thrum intensified, pulling at something inside him. He turned, scanning the shadows between collapsed cargo containers and tangled, sparking wires. Nothing, just the groaning structure of the dead ship settling around him. Then a light bloomed in the darkness, not a ship light but something softer, pulsing. It resolved into a shape, humanoid but clearly not. It flowed rather than walked, trailing faint luminescence like spilled ink against the black. As it drew closer, the light intensified, revealing subtle, shifting patterns beneath a taut, almost fluid surface. It wasn't just light. It was communication, emotion, he realized with a jolt, pressing against his senses in a way that felt both overwhelming and strangely alluring. The thrum peaked as the figure stopped a few meters away, the light coalescing into the form of a woman, her features defined by glowing lines and pools of intense color that seemed to pulse in time with his own sudden, frantic heartbeat. Her eyes were twin points of searing blue light that held his gaze with unnerving intensity. "You must not disengage," she said again, the sound layered with that internal resonance. Her hand lifted, translucent and edged with faint light, pointing towards the sparking junction box. "The conduit, it is vital, my access is almost complete." Cale stared, dumbfounded. An alien here on this cursed hulk, and talking about his half-finished, entirely unauthorized repair job like it was a shared project. "Access. Lady, I'm trying to keep this section from venting atmosphere. This whole ship's a death trap." He gestured vaguely with the wrench. "And who are you?" The light on her surface rippled, a complex pattern of yellows and deep violets he couldn't decipher but somehow felt as apprehension and impatience. "There is no time for designation," she urged, the resonance sharpening. "The power flow is critical. If you cease, my connection will fracture. Generations of effort will be lost." She extended her glowing hand further, palm up, towards the conduit he was working on. "Maintain the flow, please." Cale hesitated. Every instinct screamed danger, screamed run, screamed don't engage with the unknown. But the intensity in those twin blue points of light, the sheer need resonating from her, anchored him. And honestly, the idea of generations of effort being lost because he pulled out of a job, it was absurd enough to feel real in the bizarre context of this ship. He glanced at the sparking box, then back at her. Her light patterns flickered, less vibrant now, as if the effort of maintaining contact and her access was draining her. All right, he grumbled, pushing his cap back slightly. "Don't get your glowing things in a twist, but you owe me an explanation, a big one." He gripped the wrench again, leaning back into the unstable structure. The thrum lessened slightly as she seemed to focus on her access, but he could still feel the echo of her presence, a warm hum beneath his skin. He worked quickly, his fingers familiar with the brittle, dangerous tech. He had to admit having someone else's intent focused on the job even silently felt different, less alone. He tightened the fitting, bypassed the fried junction with a jury-rigged patch, sweat beading on his brow. The sparks lessened, the ominous crackling died down, replaced by a steady, low hum of power flowing where it shouldn't. He stepped back, wiping his hands on his worn trousers. "There. Stable. For now, anyway." "You got your access?" He looked at her. Her light patterns were shifting rapidly now, a cascade of brilliant greens and golds interspersed with deep blues. The resonance flooded him, a dizzying wave of what felt like triumph and profound relief, mixed with an undercurrent of exhaustion. It was overwhelming, beautiful, and completely alien. "Yes," she breathed, the words seeming to shimmer in the air. The intensity of her light began to recede, pulling back into itself, defining her form more sharply but less blindingly. She looked solid now, though still composed of that shifting, luminous substance. She took a hesitant step towards him. You helped despite the risk, despite the strangeness. Kale shrugged, trying to regain his composure. The sensory overload was receding, leaving him feeling slightly lightheaded. Figured you weren't going to vaporize me on the spot. And hey, someone had to make sure this rust bucket didn't tear itself apart. Besides, generations of effort sounds important. What was it? She tilted her head, the blue light of her eyes fixing on him. The resonance shifted, becoming curious, analytical. It is an anchor, a connection to what remains of my people, my culture, lost here within the coil. She gestured vaguely around the vast cargo bay. The ship's final purpose was not transport but preservation of us. And the data. Her light dimmed further, revealing a subtle tension in her form. But the systems failed, cataclysmically, most dissolved, dispersed. Only a core survived, sustained within the matrix. I am a projection, a guardian, dependent on the ship's remaining power flows. Her words were sparse, but the resonance amplified them, painting a picture of unimaginable loss and isolation. Kale felt a pang he hadn't expected. Isolation he understood. Lost things he understood. So you're a ghost? He asked, trying for levity, but the word felt wrong. She wasn't a ghost. She was intensely present in a way that went beyond the physical. A remnant, she corrected softly. Her light flickered, a new pattern emerging, a complex interplay of soft blues and grays like distant nebulae. It felt like sorrow and immense ancient weariness. Sustained, yes, but precarious. And others hunt what I protect. Her gaze sharpened, returning to the piercing blue. Predators. Drawn by the signal when I connect. They seek the data core to exploit it, to extinguish the last light. Kale felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's stale air. He knew about predators. He'd spent his life avoiding them. Who? He asked, his hand resting near his pistol again. Corporations, slavers. Her light flared briefly, a sharp red pattern flashing before subsiding. It felt like anger. Those who value profit above existence. They have tracked the coil for cycles, waiting. And now, they know the anchor is active. She looked at him again, the resonance softening slightly. You helped me initiate the connection. Now, you are linked to its signal, to my signal. They will see you. Kale swore under his breath. Great, just great. He came here for scrap and maybe some pre-collapse tech, and instead, he'd stumbled into an ancient alien data war and painted a target on his back the size of this entire derelict. So what, you expect me to fight off corporate mercs for you now? I'm a scavenger, not security. He tried to sound annoyed, but a part of him, the part that resonated with her loneliness, felt a strange pull. You could leave, she stated, the blue light of her eyes steady. The signal is faint where you are. You might evade detection. She paused. But I am alone, and the anchor is fragile. The sorrowful light patterns pulsed again. Kale looked around the vast, empty cargo bay, the silent tombs of a vanished species. Then he looked at her, the living, glowing remnant, radiating a need that bypassed logic and survival instinct. He had always run from his past, run from attachments, run from anything that required him to stay and fight. But the idea of leaving her here alone to face whatever was coming, it felt colder than the void outside. All right, he said, the words surprising even himself. All right. What exactly are you guarding, and how do we keep it and you from being extinguished? He saw a subtle shift in her light, a flicker of something he couldn't name, but it felt like hope. Thank you, she resonated, the warmth of it spreading through him like a slow infusion. The light patterns on her surface shifted, stabilizing into softer hues, blues and silvers, a calmer, less frantic display. The core is deep within the ship's central architecture, the heart of the coil. She extended her hand, the faint glow outlining her fingers towards the deck plating. Access is labyrinthine, designed for my people, not carbon-based life. A hint of awkwardness resonated, a subtle tremor in the otherwise smooth flow. Kale grunted. Figures, nothing's ever easy on these old hulks. All right, luminous lady, where do we start? He felt a question resonate from her, a tentative curiosity. You gave me a name, luminous lady. The light patterns rippled, almost like amusement. My designation is Lyra. The sound of it, spoken aloud, was sharp and melodic, fitting the light that flowed across her form. Kale repeated it, testing the feel of it on his tongue. Lyra, okay, Kale. He offered his name, feeling strangely vulnerable doing so. Names were currencies, points of connection predators could exploit, but with Lyra it felt necessary. She seemed to absorb the sound, the light around her eyes brightening slightly in acknowledgement. Kale, she echoed, the resonance around his name a soft, pleasant hum. Then Kale. The core access point is several decks below. The primary transit shafts are offline. We must navigate the service conduits and maintenance crawlspaces. Her light pulsed, a directional marker appearing as a bright point on the deck plating. It will be restrictive, dark, and potentially hazardous. Kale suppressed a sigh. Of course, the crawlspaces, where ancient, unknown dangers lurked and scavengers usually got lost or crushed. Hazardous is my middle name on this ship, he muttered, retrieving his heavy-duty cutting torch and a multi-tool. Lead the way, Lyra. He followed her as she flowed towards a dark opening hidden behind a pile of debris. Getting in was easier for her, her form seeming to compress and slide through the narrow gap. Kale had to use his torch to widen it, sparks flying as he cut through reinforced plating. He squeezed through, his pack snagging, cursing softly. The space inside was cramped, airless, and utterly dark save for the soft glow of Lyra, who waited patiently just ahead. Her light wasn't just illumination, it felt comforting, pushing back the oppressive darkness. This is cozy, Kale muttered, pulling his pack free. Hope you don't mind tight spaces. My physical form is adaptable, she resonated, a faint, almost shy ripple of light crossing her surface. Yours appears more constrained, Kale chuckled despite himself. Understatement of the cycle, just try not to float off and leave me for the space rats. He followed her, the only sound the scrape of his gear and his own breathing. Lyra moved silently, her light the only guide through the twisting, turning conduits. He could feel her presence intensely here, the low thrum of her resonance a constant companion in the close darkness. It was strange how quickly he was getting used to it, how it was starting to feel natural. There was a moment when the passage narrowed to an impossible degree and Kale was forced to shed his pack, squeezing through sideways, scraping his shoulders. Lyra paused, her light focused on him. Are you injured? She resonated, a note of concern entering the thrum. Nah, just bruised my ego, Kale grunted, retrieving his pack on the other side. These old ships don't build 'em for comfort. He pushed a stray wire out of his face, catching a glimpse of her form in the dim light. She was closer now, the edge of her glow nearly touching him in the tight space. The resonance felt warmer, more focused. You tolerate discomfort readily, she observed. Her light patterns shifted, a curious probing quality to the glow. It felt like she was trying to understand something fundamental about him. Comes with the job, Kale said, adjusting his pack. Scavengers don't get luxury suites. He met her gaze, the twin blue points in the dim light of the conduit. There was an intensity there, a depth he found himself drawn to, despite the alienness. The air between them felt thick, charged, not just with the recycled ship air but with something else, something that pulsed with her light. He could feel the subtle hum of her resonance deep in his bones, a sensation unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It was like being seen, truly seen, not just by eyes but by some deeper sense. He cleared his throat, breaking the moment. So, how much further to this core access? Her light patterns softened, losing their probing edge, returning to the steady guide. Not far, she resonated, but the path is circuitous, and there are automated defenses still active. Kale tensed. Defenses like what? Like thermal lances, sonic emitters, kinetic barriers. She listed them off with a calm that belied the deadly nature of the weapons. Kale swore again. Great. Just what a guy needs in a crawl space. All right, heads up then. Let me know if your light starts doing anything fancy that means death trap ahead. She didn't respond verbally, but her light pulsed twice, a clear signal of acknowledgement. They moved on, deeper into the belly of the coil, the oppressive darkness closing in behind them, leaving only the soft, guiding light of Lyra and the growing, undeniable connection that hummed between them in the silent, cramped space. The thought of turning back felt impossible now. He was already too deep, in more ways than one. He could feel the subtle shift in the air ahead, a faint warmth that hadn't been there moments before. Lyra's light patterns shifted, a complex weaving of amber and red warning him. Thermal lance, she resonated, the sound sharp and urgent in his chest. Pressure plate ahead. Do not proceed. Cale froze, his boot inches from the deck plating. He peered ahead, his light beam barely piercing the gloom, but he could make out the faint outline of a seam in the floor. A pressure plate. He wiped sweat from his forehead. Lovely, how do we get past it? Lyra's light shifted again, flowing back towards a junction they just passed. Alternative path, more unstable, but necessary, Cale nodded. Unstable beat vaporized. They backtracked, Lyra flowing effortlessly through the narrow passage. Cale grunted with effort, his body protesting the cramped movements. The alternative path was indeed unstable. The plating here was buckled, sections missing, revealing glimpses of terrifyingly deep chasms within the ship's structure. The air grew colder, thinner. Lyra's light seemed to dim slightly, as if absorbing the decay around them. Careful, Cale warned, his voice low. He tested each handhold and foothold before committing his weight. One wrong move and he'd fall into the endless dark below. Lyra paused at a particularly treacherous section where the floor had collapsed entirely. Only a narrow beam remained, slick with condensation. We must cross here, she resonated, the hum in his chest tighter with concern. The passage beyond is clear. Cale eyed the beam. It looked barely wide enough for his boot, and a long drop. All right, he said, taking a deep breath. You first. Show me how it's done, Ghost Girl. He immediately regretted the nickname. It felt dismissive of her fragile, luminous existence. But Lyra's light simply rippled, a soft violet hue suggesting understanding or maybe tolerance. She flowed onto the beam, her form adapting, becoming thinner, more elongated, her light concentrated along the surface of the beam. She moved with an unnerving grace, like liquid light flowing across a wire. Cale watched her, fascinated despite the peril. There was a pure, elemental beauty to her movement, a stark contrast to the decaying metal around them. She reached the other side and turned, her blue eyes fixed on him. Your turn, Cale, she resonated. The sound was an invitation, a challenge, and a reassurance all at once. Cale took another breath, adjusted his grip on his pack, and stepped onto the beam. The metal groaned under his weight. He forced himself not to look down into the chasm, focusing instead on Lyra, on the steady glow of her light across the gap. He moved slowly, inch by painstaking inch, his muscles screaming with the effort of maintaining balance. Halfway across, a section of the beam shifted unexpectedly. Cale cried out, stumbling, his foot slipping. He windmilled his arms, fighting for balance, his heart hammering against his ribs. He was falling, he knew it, plunging into the dark. Then a sudden, impossible pressure against his chest, stabilizing him. Lyra. She had flowed back onto the beam, her luminous form pressed against him, radiating intense heat and a powerful wave of resonance, pure, unadulterated focus and strength. He felt her shift, her substance somehow gripping the beam, anchoring them both. Her light flared brilliant white, pushing back the darkness, erasing the terrifying depth below. Hold, she resonated, the word a tight, focused beam of intent in his mind. He clung to the beam, breathing hard, his face pressed against her warm, glowing surface. He could feel the subtle pulse of her, a vibration that was both alien and incredibly intimate in their shared peril. The air between them crackled, thick with adrenaline and something else entirely. He could feel the flow of her light, the energy she was expending to hold him steady, the raw power in her touch. It was overwhelming, intoxicating. Lyra, he gasped, the word muffled against her. Her light patterns were a dizzying blur of intense colors, red, gold, purple, reflecting the sheer effort and perhaps something more. The resonance was a roar in his chest, not just focus now, but a swirling vortex of emotion, fear, determination, and something that felt astonishingly like care. With Lyra's impossible strength anchoring him, Cale slowly, painstakingly, regained his footing. He shuffled the remaining distance across the beam, Lyra pressing against him the entire way, guiding him, supporting him. They reached the other side, collapsing against the relatively stable plating. Cale leaned back against the cold metal, his body trembling, breathing ragged. Lyra remained close, her light still intense, but the frantic patterns were subsiding, replaced by a softer, pulsing glow of relief and something else. A lingering, charged awareness. The resonance was still powerful, a warm, intimate hum surrounding him. You, you saved me, Kale managed, looking up at her. Her blue eyes were steady, her form regaining its more defined shape as the need for extreme adaptation passed. We are linked now, she resonated, her voice softer, the power tempered by a new vulnerability. If you fall, my anchor is weakened, my purpose jeopardized. It was a logical explanation, but the resonance beneath the words told a different story. It spoke of choice, of immediate instinctive protection, of something that went beyond mere utility. He could feel the echo of the intensity of her touch, the raw power she had poured into saving him. It lingered on his skin, deep within his bones. He pushed himself upright, still feeling the ghost of her warmth. Still, thank you. He hesitated, then reached out, his fingers hovering near her glowing form. He wanted to touch her, to confirm the reality of what had just happened, the impossible strength, the undeniable connection. Lyra watched his hand, her light patterns shifting with anticipation and perhaps a hint of trepidation. The air between them thickened again, charged with unspoken things. We should proceed, she resonated, her voice low. The urgency was back, pulling them forward, but the moment, the shared brush with death and the raw intimacy of being held by her light, hung in the air, unresolved, humming between them in the dark. They continued deeper into the ship, the crawlspaces giving way to narrow maintenance tunnels barely wide enough for Kale to move through. The air grew colder, the silence more profound, broken only by the distant groaning of the ship's vast structure. Lyra led the way, her light the constant, reassuring presence in the oppressive dark. The tension from the thermal lance and the collapsing floor lingered, a thread connecting them through the silent tunnels. Kale found himself watching her, not just for guidance, but simply watching the way her light flowed, the subtle shifts in color and pattern that spoke volumes where there were no words. He was becoming attuned to her, he realized, learning the language of her light, the cadence of her resonance. A soft violet hum meant she was focused. A gentle green pulse suggested curiosity. A faint, shimmering silver was calm. It was a slow, instinctive process, bypassing his usual cynical defenses. He felt less like a scavenger and more like an explorer, charting a new, luminous landscape within himself. So, Kale said, breaking the silence, his voice sounding loud in the confined space. You said you're a guardian of data, generations of effort. He wanted to understand, to piece together the fragments she'd offered. Lyra paused, her light pooling slightly around her form. The resonance softened, a hesitant quality entering it. Yes, the coil was a vessel, a sanctuary. Built by my ancestors when our world faced extinction. Her light pattern shifted, a complex, somber dance of deep blues and grays tinged with sorrow. The core holds the collective consciousness, the memories, knowledge, skills, the very essence of our people, preserved in a state of stasis, waiting. Kale listened, his usual sarcastic retorts caught in his throat. The scale of it was staggering. An entire species preserved as data on a derelict ship, guarded by a single luminous being. Waiting for what? He asked quietly. For a time when existence is possible again, Lyra resonated. When a suitable world can be found, when the resources for reconstruction can be gathered. It was a long-term plan. Her light pulsed, a sharper, almost bitter note entering the resonance. A plan interrupted. The predators, they sought to weaponize the core, to twist our knowledge, our very being, into a tool for conquest. Kale felt a jolt of understanding. This wasn't just about data. It was about survival, about legacy, about preventing the ultimate violation. And you're the last line of defense, he said. She didn't respond verbally, but her light intensified briefly, a silent affirmation. The resonance around her tightened, a reflection of the immense burden she carried. What happens if they get the core? Lyra's light flickered violently, a sudden, chaotic burst of red and black. The resonance was a jolt of pure, visceral terror and horror that ripped through Kale. They would consume it, she resonated, her voice trembling with the internal vibration. Twist it, our collective mind would become a weapon, enslaved, tortured, used to destroy others. The image flashed in Kale's mind, horrifying in its implications. He recoiled from the intensity of her resonance. He hadn't just agreed to guard some tech. He'd agreed to help prevent the ultimate perversion of an entire species. Okay, he said, needing a moment to steady himself. Okay, that's heavy, really heavy. He looked at her at the way her light patterns slowly calmed, settling back into blues and silvers but with a tremor of lingering fear. So the access point, is it trapped? Are there more defenses? Yes, she resonated, the tremor still present. The final defense, a resonance lock, designed to interact with our specific energy signatures, a biological key. She hesitated. It requires strong, focused, resonant output, a merging of frequencies. Kale felt a cold knot form in his stomach, a biological key, a merging of frequencies. He looked at Lyra, at her luminous form, at the way her resonance had just flooded him with terror. And you have to do that, her light dimmed slightly. I am too fragmented. The impact scattered much of my core energy. I lack the necessary focus. The stability. She paused, her blue eyes fixing on him with an unnerving intensity. The resonance shifted, becoming tentative, hopeful, and filled with a question he didn't want to hear. However, your resonance field is unusual, Kale. It resonates with mine powerfully. Kale stared at her. He'd felt the thrum, the hum, the jolts of her resonance, but he'd thought it was just his senses reacting to her alien biology. He hadn't realized it was a two-way street, that he had his own resonance field. My resonance field? He asked, the words clumsy. I don't have a resonance field, I'm just a guy with a wrench. Lyra's light pulsed gently, a soft, insistent warmth. All life possesses one. Yours is compatible, perhaps amplified by our shared proximity, by the danger we have faced together. Her light patterns became more complex, a delicate dance of blues and golds that felt like invitation and vulnerability. If we could combine our resonance, focus it, it might be enough. Kale felt a wave of something he couldn't immediately identify. It wasn't just fear of the unknown tech. It was a sudden, overwhelming awareness of the intimacy of what she was proposing, merging frequencies, combining resonance. After the shared physical vulnerability on the beam, this felt like an even deeper exposure, a blending of something unseen but profoundly personal. Combine our resonance, Kale repeated slowly, the words feeling thick in his mouth. How exactly does that work? Lyra's light shifted, a shy, hesitant quality to it. It requires closeness, focus, a willingness to merge your inner light with mine. The resonance was delicate now, fragile. A bond, Kale's mind reeled, a bond, with an alien he'd met hours ago on a death-trap ship. His entire life had been about avoiding bonds, about staying free and unattached. But the thought of leaving her, of letting her face this alone, the sheer weight of what she protected, it was a conflict raging inside him. And beneath it all, the quiet hum of her presence, the growing resonance between them, was a powerful counterpoint to his instinct to run. He looked at her, at the expectant glow in her blue eyes, the vulnerability in her light patterns. He was trapped not just by the ship's layout, but by the impossible connection that had formed between them in the dark. He took a deep breath. All right, Lyra, he said, the words firm despite the turmoil within him. Show me how we do this resonance thing. Her light flared, a soft, radiant wave that felt like pure relief and gratitude. The resonance that washed over him this time was warm, hopeful, and pulling him closer in the silent, waiting dark. They reached the access point, a large, circular portal set into the tunnel wall, shimmering with faint energy. Strange, glyph-like patterns pulsed on its surface, patterns that resonated with Lyra's light. Around the portal were complex mechanisms, conduits and panels of unknown alien tech. The air here felt different, charged with static and a low, almost musical hum that seemed to emanate from the portal itself. Lyra flowed towards it, her light interacting with the glyphs, causing them to glow brighter in response. This is the entry point, she resonated, her voice lower now, filled with a sense of reverence. The lock is woven into the portal's energy field. Kale approached cautiously, running a scanner over the humming tech. It was unlike anything he'd ever encountered, far beyond pre-collapse human design. So we need to combine our resonance into this thing. He gestured vaguely at the portal. Lyra nodded, her light steady. Yes, the patterns require a specific harmonic frequency, one I cannot generate alone, one we must create together. She turned to face him, the blue light of her eyes holding his gaze. The resonance between them intensified, a warm pressure building in Kale's chest. Lyra extended her hand again, the luminous fingers reaching towards him. It requires physical proximity, a merging of our energy fields. She paused, the resonance turning hesitant. And mental focus, a shared intent. Kale swallowed. Physical proximity felt different now, charged with the memory of her holding him on the beam, the raw power and intimacy of that moment. "Okay," he said, his voice slightly hoarse. He reached out his own hand, calloused and scarred, and hesitated before her luminous fingers. He wasn't sure what would happen when he touched her. Would his hand pass through her? Would it burn? Lyra seemed to sense his hesitation. Her light softened around her hand, a shimmering invitation. "It will not harm you," she resonated gently. "It is a joining, not a collision." He nodded, took a breath, and his fingers brushed against hers. It wasn't a solid touch, but it wasn't nothing either. It felt like plunging his hand into warm, thick liquid light. A jolt went through him, not painful but intense, like a powerful electrical current that flowed directly into his core, merging with the hum of her resonance already within him. Her light flared, wrapping around his hand, flowing up his arm. The resonance between them surged, building in intensity, filling the narrow tunnel, vibrating the very metal walls. Kale felt dizzy, overwhelmed by the sensory input. Lyra's light patterns exploded into a kaleidoscope of colors around them, pulsing in time with the growing resonance. He could feel her thoughts, her intentions, not as clear words, but as complex emotional and sensory information flooding his mind, the weight of her purpose, the vastness of the preserved consciousness, the fierce determination to protect it, and beneath it all, a fragile thread of something directed at him, something warm and vulnerable. "Focus, Kale," she resonated, her voice clearer now, cutting through the sensory storm. "Focus our intent. Picture the patterns, the glyphs. See the lock opening." Kale forced himself to concentrate, pushing back the sensory overload. He looked at the glowing glyphs on the portal, at Lyra's radiant form pressing closer, her other hand lifting to rest lightly against his chest, directly over his heart. Her touch there sent another jolt through him, the resonance locking onto his own heartbeat. He could feel her light pouring into him, mingling with his own energy, creating a unified field of power and intent. It was terrifying and exhilarating. His own resonance field, whatever it was, responded, a latent energy within him waking up, flowing outwards to meet hers. It felt like two currents merging, swirling together into a single, powerful vortex. The air grew hot, thick with energy. The musical hum from the portal intensified, rising in pitch. Lyra's light reached a blinding crescendo, patterns of incredible complexity dancing across her form, mirrored somehow within Kale's own mind. "Now," Lyra resonated, the single word a hammer blow of focused intent. Kale pushed his own energy, his will, outwards, guided by Lyra's. He focused on the portal, on the image of the lock disengaging, of the path opening. The combined resonance struck the portal with invisible force. The glyphs flared violently, then, one by one, began to dim and vanish. The musical hum rose to a shriek, then cut off abruptly. There was a deep thrumming sound, a mechanical click, and the shimmering energy field across the portal dissipated. The massive circular door before them began to slide inwards, revealing a dark passage beyond. Lyra's light subsided, her form returning to its calmer state, though still radiating heat and the lingering hum of their combined energy. Kale withdrew his hand from hers, his fingers tingling, his entire body humming with residual power. He felt breathless, stunned by the intensity of the experience, the profound intimacy of merging his very essence with hers. Lyra looked at him, her blue eyes wide and luminous in the aftermath. The resonance around her was soft now, vulnerable, filled with a quiet wonder that mirrored his own. We did it," she resonated, the words barely a whisper, yet the feeling amplified, washing over him as disbelief and relief. Kale could only nod, his throat tight. He had just merged his inner being with an alien, and it had worked. The access was open, but the path beyond and the implications of the bond they had just forged felt even more daunting than the defenses they had overcome. He looked through the now open portal into the dark passage leading to the core, then back at Lyra, her luminous form a beacon in the dim tunnel. The shared resonance between them was no longer just a hum. It was a silent conversation, asking questions he didn't know how to answer. The passage beyond the portal was different, the air cleaner, the architecture more deliberate, less utilitarian than the rest of the ship. It felt like walking into a sanctuary hidden within a tomb. Lyra led the way, her light illuminating the path, her resonance a comforting presence after the intensity of opening the lock. Cale followed, still feeling the echo of their combined energy, the sense of his own inner landscape having been irrevocably altered by the merging of their resonance. He looked at Lyra, the way her light flowed and shifted, no longer just an alien curiosity but something he had touched, had become a part of, however briefly. The intimacy of that moment, the feeling of her mind and being melding with his, was still raw, bewildering. He wanted to talk about it, to understand what had just happened, what this bond she'd spoken of truly meant, but the words felt inadequate, clumsy. He settled for walking beside her, letting the silence and the shared resonance speak for them. They reached a large chamber, the walls covered in glowing patterns that seemed to shift and pulse with their approach. At the center of the chamber was a crystalline structure, humming with a low, powerful energy. This had to be it. The core. Lyra flowed towards it, her light interacting with the chamber's patterns, causing them to flare with recognition. The air here was thick with resonance, a complex symphony of ancient consciousness that Cale could feel pressing against his own mind. It wasn't just data, it was life, dormant but potent. Lyra stopped before the core, her light radiating reverence. This is the anchor point, she resonated softly, where the collective rests. She turned back to Cale, her blue eyes glowing with a mixture of pride and vulnerability. It is fragile, it requires constant harmonization, protection. Cale circled the core, his scanner useless against the alien tech. It felt immense, powerful, yet also incredibly delicate, like a beating heart exposed to the void. "And this is what they're hunting?" he asked, his voice low. "This, core of souls," Lyra nodded, her light dimming slightly. "Yes, they seek to harvest its power, to control the consciousness within." A wave of protective, fierce determination radiated from her, washing over Cale. He felt it resonate within himself, a mirroring of her protective instinct. It was startling how quickly her emotions were becoming his own. "So what's the plan now?" Cale asked. "We just sit here and wait for them." Lyra's light shifted, a thoughtful pattern emerging. "We fortify. The core's immediate defenses are weak. We must reactivate the surrounding systems and prepare." She looked at him, the resonance questioning. "You could still leave, Cale. Now that the access is open, you could find another path out. Your part is technically complete." Cale met her gaze. "Leave." After feeling her mind merge with his, after feeling the weight of what she protected, the thought felt like a betrayal of something deep and new within him. The bond, whatever it was, held him fast. "No," he said, the word firm. "I'm not leaving. You said we're linked. Looks like I'm in this now, Lyra." "Besides," he managed a small, wry smile, "someone's gotta make sure you don't accidentally merge your inner light with the wrong piece of tech." Lyra's light rippled, a sudden pure wave of what felt like joy and relief washing over him. It was so intense, so unexpected, that Cale felt a warmth bloom in his chest. The resonance was bright, radiant, pulling him closer. "Cale," she resonated, his name a soft caress carried on the luminous current. She flowed towards him, stopping just inches away. Her light patterns were intricate, beautiful, conveying emotions he couldn't fully name but felt intensely: gratitude, trust, and that fragile, growing vulnerability. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly, and this time he didn't hesitate. His fingers touched her arm, sinking slightly into the yielding, luminous substance. It was warm, vibrant, pulsing with life and light. Her form pressed closer, her light enveloping him in a soft, radiant cocoon. The resonance intensified, wrapping around them, a private world within the ancient chamber. He could feel her presence with every fiber of his being, the subtle shift of her light, the delicate tremor of her resonance, the depth of emotion flowing between them. It was overwhelming, sensual, a connection that bypassed the need for physical form in a way that felt profoundly intimate. He leaned into her touch, his eyes closing briefly as he let himself feel the sheer wonder of it, the alien warmth, the resonant connection that went bone deep. Lyra's light patterns shifted, becoming slower, more deliberate, conveying a deepening tenderness. He opened his eyes and met her luminous blue gaze. The air between them crackled with unspoken things. This was more than just guarding a core. This was something new, something consuming, born from shared danger and impossible intimacy. The bond was deepening, weaving itself into the fabric of his existence, tying him to this alien, to this lost species, in a way he could never have predicted. He raised his other hand, gently cupping the side of her face. Her substance yielded, warm and vibrant against his palm. He felt a tremor run through her light, a deep, resonant thrum that resonated purely as desire. He pulled her closer, drawn into the radiant heart of her being, ready to face whatever came next together. The days that followed blurred into a rhythm dictated by the dormant ship systems and the looming threat. Kale, guided by Lyra's knowledge of the coil's architecture and his own scavenging expertise, worked to reactivate dormant defense grids, reroute power to shield emitters, and prepare for the inevitable arrival of the predators. Lyra was his constant companion, her light a beacon in the dark corridors, her resonance a quiet presence that grounded him amidst the decay and uncertainty. They moved together through the ship's guts, a strange pair, the human scavenger wielding a wrench and the luminous alien guiding him with light and resonance. Their dialogue flowed easily now, a mix of practical planning and hesitant personal revelations. The banter had become a comfortable shorthand, laced with inside jokes forged in shared peril. "All right, Lyra," powers flowing to the forward shield conduits, Kale grunted, wiping grease from his hands. "Think that'll give us any cover?" Lyra's light pulsed with a pattern that Kale recognized as consideration, minimal against direct assault, but it will disrupt their energy signatures, provide moments of cloaking. Her resonance was analytical, focused on the task. "Good enough for now," Kale said, securing the panel. He glanced at her. Her light was steady, focused, but he could sense the underlying tension, the weight of her responsibility. "You holding up?" he asked softly. Her light patterns shifted, a flicker of something vulnerable crossing her surface, a soft lavender hue he now associated with weariness. "The constant focus is demanding," she resonated, "maintaining the anchor, projecting my form, guiding the power flow." She trailed off, her light dimming slightly. Kale felt a pang. She was alone in this, shouldering the burden of an entire species. He wanted to ease it somehow. "Hey," he said, stepping closer. He reached out, not for her hand this time, but gently touched her arm. Her substance was warm, vibrant, pulling him in. The resonance between them intensified, a comforting exchange of energy. Her light patterns changed instantly, the lavender fatting replaced by warmer, brighter hues, soft golds and greens that felt like ease and comfort. The resonance pulsed gently, a quiet sigh of relief. "Your touch," she resonated, the sound filled with wonder. "It stabilizes my field. Calms the disruption." Kale felt a warmth spread through him, separate from the heat of her light. "Yeah, good. Keep touching me then," he said, trying for lightness, but his voice was rougher than he intended. He moved his hand up her arm, his fingers exploring the strange, fluid surface of her form. It was mesmerizing, the way her light swirled beneath his touch. Lyra leaned into him, her luminous form pressing closer. The resonance intensified, pulling him into a vortex of sensation. It wasn't just emotional intimacy now. It was intensely physical, a merging of energies that felt both alien and profoundly right. Her light shifted, deepening into rich violets and pulsating reds, colors he now associated with intense emotion, with desire. The resonance was a deep, powerful thrumming that mirrored the sudden, frantic beat of his own heart. He wrapped his arms around her, drawing her close. Her form yielded, enveloping him in soft, warm light. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, breathing in the strange, clean scent that radiated from her. The physical reality of her, despite being light and energy, was overwhelmingly present. Her resonance poured into him, a torrent of pure, raw sensation, longing, vulnerability, a desperate need for connection that mirrored his own buried needs. He pulled her tighter, his body trembling. "Lyra," he whispered, the name a prayer against her luminous form. Her light flared in response, brilliant and overwhelming. The resonance was a roar in his head, a symphony of alien desire that consumed him. He felt her essence pressing against his, reaching for something deep inside him, something he hadn't known was there. This wasn't just touch. It was a merging, a profound, sensual connection that bypassed words and physical limitations. It was the intimacy they had forged in shared danger and vulnerability, exploding into something breathtakingly explicit. He felt her shift, her luminous form adapting, molding itself against him in ways that defied his understanding of anatomy, but which resonated with a primal rightness. The sensory input was almost too much. The swirling colors of her light behind his closed eyelids, the constant thrumming of her resonance filling his body, the feeling of her energy field intermingling with his own. It was a dance of light and resonance, of alien and human, a moment of pure, unadulterated intimacy born in the heart of a dead ship. He lost himself in the sensation, in the overwhelming presence of her, in the depth of the connection that bound them. Time seemed to dissolve. There was only Lyra, only the light, only the resonance, only this impossible, breathtaking intimacy. He felt her resonance peak, a wave of pure, radiant energy washing through him, leaving him breathless, trembling, and utterly spent, yet filled with a profound sense of peace and connection he had never known. Lyra's light softened, receding slightly, though still surrounding him in a warm, intimate glow. The intense resonance subsided into a gentle, contented hum. He held her close, unwilling to break the connection, the silence between them now filled with the quiet aftermath of their shared intimacy. He felt a new level of understanding bloom within him, a sensory appreciation for the language of her light that went beyond mere observation. It was a part of him now. He looked at her, at the soft glow of her form, the gentle pulsing of her light patterns. There was a quiet vulnerability about her now, a post-intimacy softness that was profoundly human despite her alien nature. What was that? Cale whispered, the words unnecessary in the face of the resonance still flowing between them. Lyra's light shifted, a pattern of soft blues and greens flowing across her surface like calm water. A harmonization, she resonated softly. A joining, deepening the bond. The term was clinical, but the feeling accompanying it was anything but. It was warmth, contentment, a profound sense of having found a sanctuary in the most unexpected place. He tightened his hold on her, burying his face in her light again. "Yeah," he murmured, deepening the bond. The words felt right. He was tied to her now in a way that went beyond survival, beyond shared purpose. He was tied by light, by resonance, by an intimacy that had stripped away his defenses and left him raw, vulnerable, and astonishingly not alone. He could hear a faint, distant sound now cutting through the ship's silence, a low thrumming that wasn't Lyra's resonance, an external sound. His senses, heightened by the recent intimacy, identified it instantly. Ship engines, getting closer. "Lyra," he said, his voice urgent now. "They're here." The shift from profound intimacy to immediate danger was jarring, but the bond they had forged held them together. Cale pushed himself away from Lyra, his body still humming with the aftermath of their connection, but his mind snapping back to survival. "How long do we have?" he asked, grabbing his pistol. Lyra's light patterns shifted rapidly, a chaotic swirl of blues and reds indicating alarm and calculation. The resonance intensified, sharp with urgency. "Minutes. Perhaps less." "They are moving fast." She flowed towards the chamber's entrance, her form becoming more streamlined, ready for movement. "The shield emitters are active, but they will not hold long against concentrated fire. The core must be shielded physically." Cale looked at the crystalline structure at the center of the chamber. There was nothing here to shield it. "How? We don't have any materials." Lyra paused at the entrance, turning back to him. Her light pulsed with a sudden, desperate determination. "The ship's architecture, parts of the inner framework can be reconfigured, pulled inwards." Cale understood. It was a desperate measure, collapsing parts of the ship onto the core chamber, creating a physical barrier. It would make the core inaccessible even to them, potentially forever, but it might buy time, might make the cost too high for the attackers. "That'll crush half the ship," Cale protested. "Including us if we're not careful." Lyra's light was resolute. "It is the only way. My connection to the core allows me limited control over the internal structure, but I need you to guide the process, to secure the points, to ensure we are not entombed with it. The resonance that flowed from her was stark, sacrifice and necessity. Kale swore under his breath. Just when things got quiet, just when he found something worth staying for, the universe threw another curveball. But there was no hesitation in Lyra, no wavering in her resolve. He looked at her, at the fierce blue light in her eyes, at the way her luminous form seemed to tighten with determination. The bond between them felt like an unbreakable chain, yanking him forward. "All right," he said, nodding grimly. "Tell me what you need me to do, and tell me fast." Lyra's light pattern shifted, displaying complex geometric diagrams that Kale's mind, enhanced by their resonance merging, could somehow interpret. Locations within the chamber, points where structural supports needed to be severed or redirected. "Here," she resonated, pointing with her light to a point on the wall. "Disengage the kinetic dampener. It will allow the primary support strut to retract." Kale was already moving, pulling out his cutting torch. The distant thrumming of the enemy ships was growing louder, closer. He worked with frantic speed, the torch spitting molten metal. Lyra was everywhere at once, her light guiding him, her resonance a constant stream of instructions and warnings. The chamber around them groaned as Lyra began manipulating the ship's structure. Metal shrieked and protested as massive beams shifted, plating buckled. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling. Kale dodged falling girders, narrowly avoiding being crushed as the chamber walls began to subtly deform. "More pressure coming," Kale yelled over the din, working on a stubborn joint. "Their shields are hitting the hull," Lyra's light flared, channeling energy into the task. "Almost there, just this section." Kale, the stress on her was palpable, her light flickering with the immense effort of manipulating the ship's structure through her fragmented connection. Kale finished cutting the joint, scrambling back as the massive support beam retracted with a deafening clang. He looked at Lyra, saw her light dimming, saw the strain on her. "Lyra, you need to pull back," he shouted. "You're pushing too hard." Her blue eyes were fixed on the core, her resolve unwavering. "Not yet, one more." Locking strut, she directed him to another point closer to the core itself, the most dangerous location. Kale hesitated for a split second. It was a race against time, against the attackers, against the ship collapsing around them. He saw the vulnerability in her light, the risk she was taking, but he also saw the absolute necessity. "Go," he yelled, running towards the designated spot, the floor unstable beneath his feet. He reached the strut, the air thick with dust and the smell of ozone. He raised his torch, ready to cut. Just as he activated it, the ship shuddered violently. The distant thrumming became a roar as the attackers hit the coil's outer hull with full force. A section of the ceiling directly above Lyra collapsed. "Lyra!" Kale screamed, dropping the torch and lunging towards her. He didn't know what he could do, how he could shield a being of light from solid metal, but he acted instinctively. Before he reached her, Lyra's light pulsed with blinding intensity. A force field, shimmering blue like her eyes, erupted outwards from her form, deflecting the falling debris just inches from her. But the effort clearly took its toll. Her light dimmed drastically, flickering like a dying ember. Powerful resonance that had been her constant presence throughout their journey sputtered, becoming weak and erratic. She swayed, her form becoming less distinct, more gaseous. "Lyra!" Kale reached her side as the last structural lock shifted into place, sealing the core chamber. The sound of the attackers trying to breach the ship became a dull roar, muffled by the collapsed sections. The immediate danger to the core was averted, but Lyra... He knelt beside her, his hands hovering over her weakly glowing form. Her light was a faint, struggling pulse. The strong, vibrant being he had bonded with was fading. "Lyra, talk to me," he pleaded, the fear a cold knot in his gut. Her blue eyes were barely visible now, faint points of light in the dimming glow. The resonance was a weak, pained whisper in his mind. The effort, too great, the anchor, fraying. Her light flickered again, closer to extinguishing this time. Kale felt a surge of desperation. He had to help her. He reached out, placing his hands gently on her form, trying to send his own warmth, his own energy into her. "No, don't fade on me now, Lyra," he urged. "We did it, the core is safe." He poured his intent into his touch, focusing on the feeling of their bond, on the resonance they had shared, trying to reignite her light. Her resonance pulsed weakly against his hands. "Kale, you're light, strong." The words were barely there. He focused harder, remembering the moment they had opened the portal, the incredible surge of power when their resonance merged. He tried to recreate that feeling, to offer his own energy to her struggling form. He felt a subtle shift under his hands, a faint strengthening of her light. It wasn't much, but it was something. He held on to her, channeling everything he had, refusing to let her go, refusing to let the light that had guided him through the darkness finally extinguish. He had found her, found a connection, found a reason to stay. He wouldn't lose her now. Kale stayed with Lyra, his hands on her weakly glowing form, pouring his energy into her, focusing on the bond that connected them. The ship groaned around them, the muffled sounds of the frustrated attackers a constant reminder of the danger outside. But in the core chamber, sealed off by the collapsed structure, there was only the dim light of Lyra and Kale's desperate attempt to keep it from fading. Hours bled into silence. The external noise eventually died down. Whether the attackers had given up, been driven off, or were simply regrouping, Kale didn't know or care. His world had shrunk to this chamber, to the fragile light in his hands. Lyra's light pulsed erratically, sometimes strengthening slightly, sometimes flickering alarmingly close to nothingness. Her resonance was a faint whisper, a fragile thread connecting them. "Just hold on, Lyra," Kale murmured, his voice hoarse. "Don't go, don't leave me here." He felt selfish saying it, acknowledging his own need in her moment of peril, but the words were true. She had become his anchor in this vast, dead ship, in his lonely existence. He felt a faint pressure against his hand, a subtle shift in her light. It solidified slightly, becoming more defined. Her resonance, still weak, gained a fragile clarity. "Kale, the core, needs access." She resonated, her intent focused despite her weakness. Kale looked at the crystalline structure, now sealed behind tons of collapsed metal and debris. "We can't get to it, Lyra," he said gently. "It's locked up tight. You saved it, but we're trapped in here too, sort of." Lyra's light pulsed with renewed urgency. "No, trapped. The core is the anchor. The core can project a temporary field, allowing passage through matter." Kale stared at her. The core could project a field, allowing them to pass through the ship's structure. It sounded like something out of a wild tale, but after everything he'd seen Lyra do, after merging his resonance with hers, he was ready to believe anything. "But you need to be strong enough to control it," he said, his gaze returning to her flickering light. "And you're not yet." Her light pulsed again, a focused beam of intent. "Your light, your resonance, Kale, together we can draw power from the core, temporarily enough to create the field, reach safety." The sheer audacity of the idea took his breath away. To tap into the power of the collective consciousness, to merge their energy fields again, but this time fueled by an entire species' dormant power. It was incredibly dangerous, but it was also their only way out. He looked at Lyra, at the faint blue glow of her eyes, radiating hope and trust. He felt the pull of the bond between them, stronger now than ever after the shared crisis. He had come to this ship alone, seeking dead tech. He had found something infinitely more valuable, something that pulsed with life and light and an impossible connection. He wouldn't abandon that. He wouldn't abandon her. "All right, Lyra," he said, his voice firm. "Let's do it. Let's draw on that power together." He shifted, kneeling fully before her, placing his hands on either side of her head, his fingers sinking into her warm, luminous substance. He closed his eyes, focusing on the feeling of their bond, on the faint thread of her resonance. He reached out with his own awareness, following her subtle guidance, sensing the connection she still maintained with the core, even through the physical barrier. He felt the hum of the core's power, distant but immense, like a sleeping giant. Lyra's resonance strengthened slightly under his touch, focusing their combined intent. "Reach for it, Kale," she resonated in his mind, the sound clearer now, filled with a quiet power. "Let our lights merge. Draw the energy." He pushed his own consciousness outwards towards the distant hum, guided by Lyra. He felt his energy field expand, intertwining with hers, creating a channel, a link to the core. The humming intensified, flowing into them, into the chamber, a river of pure, resonant energy. Lyra's light flared, growing steadily brighter, stronger, fueled by the core's power. Kale felt the energy surge through him, invigorating, overwhelming. It was like being plugged directly into the heart of a star. Lyra's form solidified, radiating brilliant light, her blue eyes blazing with renewed strength. The resonance between them became a powerful current, a unified field pulsing with the combined energy of two beings in a dormant species. The field. Now, Lyra resonated, her voice ringing with power. They focused their combined will, their combined resonance outwards, envisioning the chamber walls becoming permeable, the debris dissolving before them. A shimmering, translucent field pulsed outwards from Lyra, expanding to encompass both of them. The metal walls seemed to ripple, to shimmer and fade, becoming transparent. Kale looked through the solid steel, seeing the collapsed structure, the dark tunnels beyond. It was working. Lyra, her light brilliant, her form radiating power, reached out her hand to him. Through Kale, she resonated. Now, to safety. He took her hand, their fingers meeting in a burst of light and resonance. He felt himself lift, felt the resistance of solid matter dissolve as they began to move, flowing through the metal, through the debris, guided by Lyra's light and the powerful resonance of the core towards the outside, towards a new beginning forged in the heart of a dead ship. They passed through the ship's hull, emerging into the silent void of space. The Leviathan's coil loomed behind them, a dark, silent monument to a lost age, its core safe, its guardian and her human companion drifting free. Lyra's light remained strong, sustained by the core's residual energy, their combined resonance a beacon in the dark. Drifting in the void near the silent hulk of the Leviathan's coil, Kale felt a profound sense of unreality. Below him, the vast, dark shape of the derelict held the dormant life of an entire species, sealed away, protected. Beside him floated Lyra, her luminous form brilliant against the stars, her resonance a warm, vibrant presence that was now as essential to him as air. The field generated by the core held them, a temporary bubble of permeability allowing them to exist outside the ship's structure, but it wouldn't last forever. What now? Kale asked, his voice quiet in the vacuum carried only by the subtle vibrations of their linked energy fields. Lyra's light pulsed with a mix of uncertainty and possibility. The core's field is limited. We must reach a place of greater power, a nexus. Her light shifted, displaying coordinates, not numbers, but complex patterns of light and resonance that mapped a location in the star system. There is an ancient station, built by my ancestors, a hub for energy transfer. It may hold the power needed to fully stabilize the core and to sustain me outside the coil. Kale followed the resonance of the coordinates. It was a long way, days or weeks at sublight speeds, even longer if they had to rely on salvaged propulsion. And they had no ship. Okay, Kale said, assessing their situation. We need a ride fast. He looked back at the coil. It was too big, too damaged to fly, but maybe. The outer modules, he mused. There might be an escape pod or a shuttle bay that wasn't completely trashed. Lyra's light pulsed with understanding. Accessing the coil's schematics, limited sections remain viable. She was already sifting through the ship's wrecked memory. There is a maintenance pod bay, aft section, partially shielded. Systems indicate one pod may be intact. A faint point of light appeared on Lyra's form, indicating the location. It is a risk. The attackers may still be present or have left a patrol. Kale nodded. Risk was part of his life. Now Lyra's life. Worth it. We need to get to that station. The core's field began to fluctuate, a subtle wavering in its intensity. The field is weakening, Lyra resonated, a note of urgency entering her voice. We must move. Guided by Lyra, Kale propelled himself through the void, using his suit's thrusters, Lyra's luminous form a constant guide beside him. Reaching the aft section of the coil was a tense journey, navigating the debris field left by the attackers. They were fortunate. No enemy ships or patrols seemed to be lingering. They found the maintenance pod bay, partially venting atmosphere but otherwise intact. Inside, one small, cramped pod sat in its berth, looking blessedly functional. Kale worked quickly, checking the power core, the life support, the navigation system. Everything seemed to be operational. It's good to go, Kale announced, relief flooding him. Cramped, but it'll fly. He looked at Lyra. Can you fit in there? It's designed for one human. Lyra's light flowed, her form adapting, becoming more compressed, more fluid. My physical manifestation is flexible, she resonated. She flowed into the small cockpit, condensing herself into a shimmering, contained field of light that settled in the co-pilot's seat area, still emanating warmth and her unique resonance. Kale climbed in after her, sealing the hatch. The pod systems hummed to life. He strapped himself into the pilot's seat, Lyra's contained light poolsing beside him. It felt strange having her here, compressed into a small, glowing field, yet her presence felt as vast and intense as ever in the confined space. He ran through the pre-flight checks, his hands flying over the controls. "All right," he said, glancing at Lyra. "Strap in, luminous lady. We've got a long trip ahead." Her light pulsed in acknowledgement. He felt a wave of anticipation from her, mixed with a quiet vulnerability that resonated deep within him. He launched the pod, pulling away from the silent hulk of the coil, setting a course for the distant, ancient nexus. As the ship receded, Kale felt the core's temporary field dissipate. Lyra's light flickered slightly, and he felt a corresponding weakening in her resonance. The energy they had drawn from the core was finite. He needed to get her to that nexus fast. He settled into the pilot's routine, the hum of the pod's engines filling the silence. Beside him, Lyra's light remained steady, a constant reminder of his purpose, of the life he was protecting, of the bond they shared. It was a long, lonely journey through the void, broken only by their quiet conversations, Lyra sharing fragmented pieces of her culture, her history, her people's lost world, and Kale, in turn, sharing glimpses of his solitary, rootless life. The intimacy between them deepened, quiet and constant, a shared awareness that filled the small cockpit. They were two disparate beings, adrift in the cosmos, bound together by fate, by danger, and by an impossible connection that pulsed with light and resonance in the silent dark. He glanced at her often, captivated by the subtle shifts in her contained light, learning to read her moods, her thoughts, her emotions in the silent language of her luminescence. He felt a fiercely protective instinct towards her, a need to ensure her light didn't fade, to see her safely to her destination. And beneath that, a deeper, quieter feeling was growing, a sense of belonging he had never expected to find. The journey to the Nexus was long and arduous. The maintenance pod wasn't built for interstellar travel, its systems strained by the prolonged journey. Kale nursed the engines, rationed power, and kept a constant watch for threats. Lyra, confined to her compressed form, became more than just a passenger. She was a co-pilot in a way that transcended physical control. Her resonance, though weaker now, pulsed with navigational data, with warnings of subtle energy fluctuations that Kale's sensors missed, with encouragement during the long, dark watches. She was a silent, glowing presence that filled the cramped cockpit, pushing back the crushing loneliness of deep space. Lyra's light continued to dim gradually throughout the journey. Kale felt the weakening of her resonance acutely, a physical ache in his chest that mirrored the fading of her glow. He knew she was expending energy simply to maintain her form, to project her limited guidance. He tried to conserve power for her, shutting down non-essential systems, even dimming the cockpit lights, leaving only Lyra's glow as illumination. One cycle after a particularly rough patch of navigating a stellar debris field, Lyra's light dipped dangerously low, flickering like a candle in a draft. Kale felt a jolt of panic. "Lyra," he said, his voice tight with fear. "What's happening? Are you all right?" Her resonance was barely a whisper. Core energy, depleted, maintaining form, difficult. Her light flickered again, and Kale felt a piece of the bond between them seem to snap, a brief moment of terrifying disconnection before it reasserted itself, fragile and thin. He reached out, his hand hovering over her contained light. He hesitated for a moment, then placed his palm against the surface of her compressed form. Her light surged weakly at his touch, and he felt a faint return of her resonance, a sigh of relief. He kept his hand there, focusing his intent, trying to share his own meager energy to offer comfort. "Just hold on, Lyra," he murmured, his forehead resting against the cool metal of the control panel. "We're getting close. We just have to make it." He could feel her focus sharpening slightly under his touch, a tiny spark of renewed determination. Her light, though still dim, became steadier. He stayed like that for a long time, his hand on her, sharing the silence and the tension of the journey, the physical contact a lifeline for both of them. It wasn't the explosive, overwhelming intimacy of the core chamber, but a quiet, tender connection born of shared vulnerability and the desperate need for survival. He learned more about her people in those long stretches of silence and shared proximity than he had in the initial chaos. Fragments of history, echoes of their world, conveyed through subtle shifts in her light and the emotional landscape of her resonance. He learned of their connection to light, to energy, of their complex societal structures, of the catastrophe that had driven them to preserve themselves within the coil. He shared parts of his own story too, the rootlessness, the loss, the reasons he kept moving. They built a bridge between their worlds, one silent moment, one shared feeling, one touch at a time. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the ancient Nexus station appeared on the horizon. It was massive, a spiderweb of gleaming metal and light, far older and more advanced than anything Kale had ever seen. It pulsed with power, a beacon in the dark. "We're here, Lyra," Kale said, his voice filled with exhaustion and relief. Her light flared, stronger now, fueled by the proximity of the powerful station. Her resonance returned, a wave of pure, unadulterated hope that washed over him. "The Nexus," she resonated, the sound filled with reverence. "It is real, it still functions." Guiding the pod towards the station was another challenge. Its approach systems were ancient, requiring precise energy matching. Lyra, her light now vibrant, guided him through the complex docking sequence, her resonance flowing through the pod systems, subtly adjusting the energy output. He trusted her completely, his hands following the instincts her resonance implanted in his mind. They docked in a vast, silent hangar bay. The airlock cycled with a deep, resonant hum that felt familiar, like an echo of Lyra's own being. Kale opened the cockpit hatch, stepping out onto the cold metal floor. He turned back to the pod. Lyra's contained light pulsed, expectant. "All right, Lyra," Kale said, offering her his hand. "Time to get out of the box." Her light flowed, expanding, her form reforming from the contained field. She emerged from the pod, stretching her luminous limbs, her light brilliant and strong in the hangar bay. The resonance radiating from her filled the space, a powerful, vibrant presence. She looked at him, her blue eyes shining, her light patterns a dazzling display of relief and gratitude. "We arrived, Kale," she resonated, her voice strong and clear, the resonance deep and warm. "Because of you." Kale felt a lump form in his throat. "We made it, Lyra, together." He looked at her radiant form, at the powerful presence she now projected. She was no longer the fragile remnant he'd found on the coil. She was a being of immense power and beauty. And she was here, beside him, their bond a tangible force in the air between them. The Nexus station was a marvel. Powered by a contained star at its core, it hummed with clean, boundless energy. Lyra, her light now brilliant and steady, navigated the station's labyrinthine corridors with an innate understanding. Kale followed, still feeling the slight disorientation of being somewhere so vast, so advanced, after the decay of the coil. Lyra led him to a central chamber, filled with pulsing energy conduits and shimmering fields. At the heart of the chamber was a structure similar to the coil's core, but larger, more complex, humming with incredible power. "This is the primary nexus point," Lyra resonated, her voice filled with awe. "The heart of the station. From here, the core within the coil can draw the power it needs to stabilize, and to allow my people to begin the process of remanifestation." Kale looked at the massive power source, then back at Lyra. "Remanifestation, they can become physical again." Lyra's light shimmered with emotion, hope, trepidation, determination. With sufficient power, the core can project stronger, more stable forms, not just fragments like me, but it will take time and constant energy and protection. She looked at him, her blue eyes intense. "The predators know this place exists. If they trace the coil here, the fight is not over." Kale felt a familiar tightening in his gut. Of course, the fight was never over. But looking at Lyra, at the potential she represented, at the countless lives dormant within the core, the thought of running felt impossible. "So," Kale said, taking a deep breath, "what's the plan? We fortify the station, set up defenses." Lyra nodded, her light resolute. "Yes, and I must establish the connection to the core. It requires deep immersion within the Nexus. It will leave me vulnerable." She paused, her light softening, the resonance becoming more intimate. "I will need Protection, Kale, more than just physical, Kale understood. She was asking him to stay, to stand by her, not just as a guard, but as the anchor for her vulnerability. The bond pulsed between them, confirming the unspoken request. "You don't even have to ask, Lyra," Kale said quietly. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." Her light flared, a wave of pure, radiant gratitude and trust washing over him. The resonance was a profound affirmation of their connection. For the next few cycles, Kale worked alongside Lyra, preparing the station for defense. He reactivated automated defense drones, rerouted power to perimeter shields, and set up early warning systems. Lyra, meanwhile, prepared for her immersion into the Nexus, a process that involved her flowing into a glowing pool of energy at the chamber's center. The moment came. Lyra turned to Kale, her light brilliant, yet with an underlying layer of apprehension. "I must do this, Kale," she resonated. "For my people, for the future." Kale stepped forward, taking her hand. Her light was warm, vibrant, a living thing under his touch. "I know," he said. "Go, I'll be here, I'll keep you safe." He pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her luminous form. It was like embracing pure energy, yet it felt profoundly intimate. Her resonance wrapped around him, a final, deep affirmation of their bond before she flowed out of his arms and into the glowing pool. Her light intensified, becoming one with the pool's energy. The resonance in the chamber swelled, a symphony of power and intent, but Lyra's individual resonance, the part that was uniquely her, began to recede, subsumed by the vast energy of the Nexus. Kale watched, a lump in his throat, feeling the connection to her stretch, becoming thin but still present. He was alone again physically, but the bond, the resonance, held him tethered to her, to this place, to this impossible future. He settled in, his pistol across his lap, his eyes scanning the chamber, listening to the hum of the station, feeling the faint, distant echo of Lyra's presence in the Nexus. The wait began. It wasn't long before the station's alarms blared. Red lights flashed, sirens wailed. The attackers had found them. Kale moved to the control panels, activating the defenses. On the main screen, he saw the dark shapes of enemy ships approaching the station. He was just one man against an unknown number of ships and potentially ground forces, protecting a submerged alien and a dormant species. But he wasn't just one man. He was Kale, bonded to Lyra, fueled by the quiet strength he had found in her light in their shared journey. He felt a surge of fierce protectiveness, not just for Lyra, but for the fragile hope she represented, for the dormant lives in the core. He wouldn't let them be extinguished. "All right," Kale muttered to himself, checking the charge on his pistol. "Let's see what you predators are made of." He glanced at the glowing pool where Lyra was immersed, felt the faint thrum of her resonance, focused on her task. He was her shield, her anchor. He wouldn't fail. He moved out of the chamber, heading for the station's defense control center, ready to face the storm. The battle for the Nexus station was a brutal, drawn-out affair. Kale, using his knowledge of salvage tech and Lyra's fragmented schematics of the station's defenses, fought a desperate, asymmetric war. He activated thermal vents to fry enemy boarding craft, rerouted power to ancient kinetic cannons, and used the station's automated systems against the attackers. He was constantly moving, dodging through corridors, planting explosive charges, fighting hand-to-hand against boarding parties that managed to breach the hull. He was just a human scavenger, outmatched and outnumbered, but he fought with a ferocity born of desperation, and a bond he refused to see broken. All the while, he felt Lyra's presence in the Nexus chamber, a faint, struggling light within the station's core energy signature. Her resonance was a constant, low thrum, a reminder of what he was fighting for. He could feel her working deep within the Nexus, establishing the connection to the coil, pouring the station's power into the distant core. The thought of her vulnerability, her reliance on him, fueled his resolve. He was tired, bruised, his breath ragged, but he kept going. Hours bled into cycles. The station groaned under attack. Sections were breached, venting atmosphere. Fires raged. Kale pushed himself beyond exhaustion, surviving on adrenaline and sheer will. There was a moment in the heart of the fighting when a group of attackers cornered him in a narrow passage. Their armor was sleek, their weapons deadly. He was out of options, his pulse pistol empty. He braced himself for the end. Then a sudden, impossible surge of power. The station's internal lighting flared blindingly, accompanied by a deafening sonic blast. The attackers recoiled, clutching their heads, their armor smoking. Lyra. She had used the station's systems, channeling energy through the internal grid to create a localized weapon. The blast was crippling, allowing Kale the precious seconds he needed to escape, leaving the stunned attackers behind. He felt a surge of gratitude mixed with alarm. That kind of direct energy manipulation must have cost her dearly in her vulnerable state. "Lyra, are you all right?" He managed to resonate back, sending his intent down the fragile thread of their bond. Faint, weak pulse of resonance was his only answer. The connection was still there but stretched incredibly thin. He had to end this. He had to protect her. He knew where the attackers' command and control were likely centered, the main hangar bay where their primary ship was docked. If he could disable it, maybe he could buy Lyra the time she needed or force them to retreat. It was a suicide run, but he saw no other option. He fought his way towards the hangar bay, the sounds of battle raging around him. He reached the massive bay doors, rigging them to blow. The explosion ripped through the doors, revealing the enemy ship, a dark, menacing vessel. Attackers swarmed the bay. Kale charged in, pulse pistol now reloaded, firing wildly, a one-man assault against overwhelming odds. He ran across the bay floor, dodging fire, making for the ship's exposed mooring cables, his target. He needed to cripple its ability to leave, to reinforce, to continue the assault. He reached the cables, pulling out his heavy-duty cutter, the same one he'd used on the coil. He started cutting, sparks flying. Enemy fire concentrated on him. Armor peeled away from his suit. He felt the impact of energy blasts, searing pain blooming across his body. He gritted his teeth, focusing on the cables. One down, two. He felt his strength draining, his vision blurring. He was dying, but he kept cutting. He had to give Lyra time. He had to protect her. As the third cable snapped, a final, devastating blast hit him. He crumpled to the ground, the cutter falling from his numb fingers. He lay there, bleeding, broken, the sounds of battle fading. His last conscious thought was of Lyra, of her light, of the bond. He felt a faint, desperate surge of resonance from her, a cry of alarm and anguish that echoed his own fading life force. Then darkness. He expected the darkness to be the end, but it wasn't empty. There was a light, soft and warm, and a presence. Lyra, not as a form but as pure resonance, pure light encompassing him. He felt her energy field wrapping around his broken body, not just warming him but healing him. It was like being immersed in the heart of the Nexus itself, a flow of pure energy reconstructing him piece by piece. He felt bones knit, torn tissue repair, blood flow strengthen. It was agonizingly slow, but it was happening. Lyra's resonance was intense now, focused, pouring all her remaining energy into saving him. He felt the strain on her, the immense cost of this impossible healing. And he realized with a jolt that she was pulling energy not just from the Nexus, but from the connection she had established with the core, diverting power meant for her people's remanifestation, diverting the very essence of her culture's survival to save him. Lyra, no. He tried to resonate, to cry out, to stop her from sacrificing everything for him. But his body was still too weak, his voice silent. He could only feel the immense flow of energy, feel her fierce, protective will pouring into him. The healing continued, relentless, driven by her love, by their bond. He felt himself becoming whole again, stronger than before, imbued with some of the core's power, some of Lyra's own luminous essence. He opened his eyes. He was still in the hangar bay, the battle silent now. The enemy ship was crippled, its mooring cables severed. Attackers lay scattered across the floor, stunned or incapacitated. And kneeling over him, her light dim, her form flickering precariously, was Lyra. She had pulled herself from the Nexus, expending the last of her reserves, pushing herself to the brink of extinction to save him. "Lyra," Kale gasped, the word torn from his throat. He reached out, his hand trembling, and touched her face. Her substance felt fragile, cold. Her light was barely aglow, just the twin blue points of her eyes holding on to him. Her resonance was a faint, almost silent whisper. "Kale, you are safe," she resonated, the effort immense. The Nexus, connection, stable, the core, drawing power. Her light pulsed one last faint time, and then with a soft sigh that resonated deep in his soul, it began to fade, pulling back into itself, becoming smaller, weaker. "No, Lyra, don't," Cale pleaded, his voice raw with emotion. He held her face, pouring his own newly revitalized energy into her, trying to reverse the flow, to give back what she had sacrificed, but it wasn't enough. Her light continued to dim, receding from his touch, her form becoming indistinct, fading into the air. "My light, Cale," she resonated, the whisper almost inaudible now but filled with a serene acceptance. "It fades, but the bond remains. Protect them." The last vestige of her light pulled back, leaving only the faint, lingering warmth of her touch on his skin, the ghost of her resonance in his chest. She was gone. Cale knelt there, alone in the silent hangar bay, clutching at the empty air where she had been. The Nexus hummed with power, the core in the coil was drawing energy, her people had a chance at remanifestation, but the luminous being who had shown him light in the darkness, who had bonded with him soul to soul, was gone. Tears streamed down his face, mingling with the grime and blood. He felt the profound, gut-wrenching ache of loss, sharper and more devastating than any physical wound. But beneath the grief he also felt something else. The bond. It was still there, a silent echo in his chest, connecting him to the Nexus, to the core, to her promise. Protect them, her last request. He wouldn't fail her. He stood up, his body whole, his resolve hardened. He looked at the crippled enemy ship, at the stunned attackers beginning to stir. Lyra had saved him. Now it was his turn to fulfill her legacy. His eyes, clearer than they had ever been, fixed on the vastness of the station, the humming heart of the Nexus, the silent promise of a species waiting to be reborn. He was no longer just a scavenger. He was a guardian for her, for them, for the light. The immediate aftermath was chaos. The remaining attackers, their command ship crippled and their forces scattered, were mopped up by the station's reactivated defenses and Cale's ruthless efficiency. His grief for Lyra was a raw wound, a constant ache beneath his ribs, but it fueled a cold, controlled fury that allowed him to secure the station, to ensure no further threats lingered. He moved through the silent corridors like a phantom, his body humming with the residual energy Lyra had poured into him, his senses heightened, attuned to the station's pulse, to the faint, distant resonance of the core. He returned to the Nexus chamber. The glowing pool still pulsed with energy, the link to the Leviathan's coil stable. He stood before it, the silence deafening. He felt the presence of the core, of the dormant consciousness within, a vast, silent ocean of being waiting to be reborn. They were here because of Lyra, because of her sacrifice, because of their bond. He reached out, his hand hovering over the glowing pool. He could feel the energy, the potential, the echoes of Lyra's fight. He lowered his hand, letting his fingers brush the surface. It felt like warm water, thick with latent power. He focused his intent, his resonance, reaching out to the core through the established link, through the echo of Lyra. "I am here," he resonated, sending the thought outwards into the luminous energy. "I will protect you, as she protected me." He felt a subtle shift in the pool's energy, a faint ripple that felt like acknowledgement, like a response. He couldn't talk to the collective consciousness like he had talked to Lyra, couldn't receive clear words or shifting light patterns. But the resonance was there, a connection forged in blood and light. He stayed in the Nexus chamber for a long time, meditating on the hum of the power, on the silent promise of the core. His purpose was clear now. He was the guardian of the Nexus, the protector of the core, the anchor for a species waiting to return. It was a lonely path, but he wasn't truly alone. He had the bond, the echo of Lyra's light and resonance that lived within him. Over the following cycles, Cale solidified the station's defenses, turning it into an impenetrable fortress. He used his scavenging skills to patch up vital systems and his fighting experience to set traps and fortify entry points. He was vigilant, knowing the predators would likely return, perhaps in greater numbers. But this time he would be ready. He spent his days maintaining the station, his nights in the Nexus chamber, sitting by the glowing pool, feeling the connection to the core, to the distant coil, to the legacy Lyra had entrusted him with. Sometimes, in the deepest quiet, he thought he could feel a subtle change in the core's resonance, a hint of stirring, of awakening. The remanifestation would be slow, perhaps taking cycles, but it would happen. Lyra's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. One evening, sitting by the pool, lost in thought, Cale felt a subtle shift in the air around him. Not the usual hum of the station, but something softer, familiar. He looked up and saw a faint light blooming at the edge of the chamber. It was weak, hesitant, but undeniably there. It coalesced not into a full form, but a shimmering outline, an echo of Lyra. Her light was incredibly faint, translucent, barely visible, but the blue points of her eyes were clear, fixed on him, and the resonance, though fragile, was hers. "Lyra," Cale whispered, afraid to believe it. The shimmering form pulsed weakly. "Cale, not Lyra." The resonance was a wispy echo layered with other faint, nascent energies. An echo, a facet, of the core, projecting through the bond. It wasn't Lyra, not entirely, but it was of her. A part of her, perhaps, or a new being forming, influenced by her fragmented consciousness and the core's energy, able to communicate through the bond Lyra had forged. The form pulsed again, a soft wave of resonance that felt like curiosity, like a question. The Guardian. Cale felt a wave of emotion, sorrow for the Lyra he had lost, and a fragile, overwhelming hope at this impossible echo. He stood up, walking slowly towards the shimmering form. "Yes," he said, his voice thick. "I'm the Guardian. She asked me to be." He reached out his hand, hesitant. The shimmering form pulsed, and a faint, translucent hand reached out to meet his. When their fingers touched, there was no jolt of power, no blinding light, just a soft, gentle warmth and a delicate wave of resonance that felt like recognition, like peace, like a beginning. The bond was still there, changed, evolved, connecting him not just to the core, but to the echoes of the one he had loved, to the promise of the future. He had found more than just salvage on the Leviathan's coil. He had found a purpose, a family, and a love that transcended form and species, living on in light and resonance, waiting to be reborn. He held the shimmering hand, his gaze fixed on the blue eyes that echoed hers, ready for whatever came next, ready to build a new future together. The cycles passed, marked by Cale's solitary routine and the slow, subtle changes in the Nexus chamber. The shimmering echo of Lyra became a more frequent visitor, appearing by the pool, its form slightly more defined each time, its resonance gaining strength and clarity. It wasn't Lyra, not his Lyra, not the dominant, intensely curious being who had held him on the beam and merged her light with his in the dark tunnels. This echo was softer, quieter, holding within it fragments of Lyra's memories, her knowledge, her essence, blended with the vastness of the core's collective consciousness. Cale talked to the echo, sharing his day, recounting moments from their journey on the coil, keeping the memory of his Lyra alive. The echo listened, its light patterns shifting with what felt like understanding, like learning. Its resonance responded, not with Lyra's sharp intellect or emotional intensity, but with a quiet empathy, a gentle probing curiosity about his world, his feelings. The bond between them deepened, different from the one he'd shared with Lyra, less physically charged, more soul deep, a connection built on shared history and a fragile future. He learned to interpret the echo's subtle shifts in light and resonance, recognizing glimmers of Lyra's personality, echoes of her humor, glimpses of her determination. It was like watching a new being form before his eyes, influenced by the past, shaped by the present, holding the promise of the future. The connection to the coil's core grew stronger, the energy transfer from the Nexus stable. Cale could feel the slow, steady process of remanifestation beginning. The core's resonance was shifting, becoming more complex, individual signatures beginning to emerge within the collective hum. It would be a long process, perhaps centuries, but the rebirth had begun. Cale dedicated himself to being the Guardian. He kept the station running, its defenses strong. He repelled probing attacks from the persistent predators, his skills honed by experience, his resolve unwavering. He was no longer just protecting a core. He was protecting a nursery, a sanctuary where a species was slowly, painstakingly returning to existence. His days were filled with the practicalities of survival and defense, but his nights were spent in the Nexus chamber with the shimmering echo. Their bond was his anchor, his family, his purpose. The echo never fully solidified into Lyra's form, never regained her full, vibrant light. It remained a translucent, shimmering presence, a bridge between the past and the future. But their connection was profound, a silent language of light and resonance, of shared history and quiet companionship. One cycle, as the echo sat beside him, its light steady Kale spoke of his past, of the loneliness that had defined his life before the coil. The echo shifted, its resonance conveying a deep, resonant empathy. It reached out a shimmering hand, not as Lyra had with purpose or need but with simple comfort. Kale took its hand, felt the familiar, gentle warmth. He closed his eyes, focusing on the resonance, letting the quiet comfort wash over him. It wasn't the burning intensity of Lyra, but it was connection, it was solace. It was love in a new, unexpected form. When he opened his eyes, the echo's light seemed to pulse with a quiet understanding. Its resonance shifted, forming a new pattern one he hadn't seen before. It felt like acceptance, like belonging, like a silent promise of a shared future. He squeezed the shimmering hand, his heart full. He had come to the end of his journey, not in the way he had expected, but in a way that felt profoundly right. He was home. He was a guardian. He was loved, and he loved in return. A love that transcended species, transcended form, living on in the light, in the resonance, in the quiet hum of the nexus, waiting for the future to unfold. The predators still prowled the void. The universe was still a dangerous place, but Kale was no longer alone. He had his charge, the slumbering species. He had the station, their sanctuary. And he had the echo, the shimmering reflection of the light that had saved him, a constant reminder of the love that had brought him here, the love that would see him through whatever came next. His life, once defined by running, was now defined by staying, by protecting, by waiting for the dawn of a new age, standing guard over a species' rebirth. His hand held by a being of light, bound by a love forged in the dark heart of a dead ship.